Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to yet another edition of An Involved Review. My name is James Caleb Kitchens, and I am joined today, as always, by my co-host Caleb Stovall. How's it going, man?
Hey, how's it going, man? Just another day here in quarantine land.
Right? Yeah, it's starting to let up a little bit, but it's crazy
Yeah,
that this is I believe the eighth episode of An Involved Review, and we started doing this in quarantine, and it's crazy. We've done 8 episodes, and we're
right.
we're still in it. So
And we've
we
gotten a lot of good feedback too.
we have gotten a lot of good feedback. We've gotten some really good feedback from a lot of people who are pretty prominent in the wrestling and entertainment industries, and we've had some incredible guests on with a lot of specialties towards the subject matter we were talking about. So I'm very happy with it. And that being said, today we're going to be covering arguably the most legendary tag team in the history of the wrestling business, the Road Warriors. Of course, this is Dark Side of the Rings episode about the Road Warriors we're going to be talking about today. So if you haven't seen that, it's available anywhere you can catch Dark Side of the Ring, which would be like Hulu, YouTube, Google Play, pretty much anywhere. Just Google Dark Side of the Ring, tons of places you can watch it. And so if you haven't seen that episode yet, you'll get a lot more out of this if you have. Go check it out, and then come back and join us for an involved review. So yeah, man, let's get into it. I know you were excited about this one because you're a big fan of the Road Warriors, isn't that right?
Yes, I'm a big fan of the Road Warriors for a number of reasons, but I can tell you that pretty much the single reason is because they were literally the very first thing I saw when it came to wrestling. There's a lot of things that I can tell people about this event and this and that, but I can remember the first time that I walked in, right? I walked in and I sat down. My dad was watching TV, and literally the first thing I saw was the red spiked, um, vest that they had and stuff like that, and or shoulder pads, I should say. Yeah, shoulder pads. And it looked like football, but it wasn't football. And I was like, Dad, what is this? And he was just like, oh, this is wrestling, and it was the Road Warriors like in the first match. I don't remember who they were fighting or anything like that, but it was a WCW Saturday night. That was what I remember was Hawk and Animal walked to the ring on a WCW Saturday night, and they just started beating the shit out of those two guys. And it was just like, oh, okay, well, I'm intrigued.
And that kind of goes to show, like, you don't remember who they were fighting, but you damn sure remember the Road Warriors. And
Yeah.
as Animal mentions in the episode, uh, you know, to this day, there is still a reference in the wrestling industry of the Road Warriors pop. And that's,
Yeah.
somebody comes out, gets a huge reaction. Hey, they just got the Road Warriors pop. That's still a term that's used to this very day in 2020. So I mean, that's how influential these guys were. Um, so for me, I think the first time I had seen them probably was in WCW at some point, probably in their second run in WCW. I think that was around like '96 or something. Um,
Around
and
that time.
yeah, so that would have been the first time I got exposed to them. It's funny because when I was a kid, I actually didn't know that the Road Warriors, Legion of Doom were like two different teams. I mean, we're the same team. I thought they were two different teams,
Yeah.
and I was like, man, these guys have really similar, like they're very similar. Like, and then eventually I figured out they're the same guys because it was confusing to see them on one program called one thing and another program to be called something else. Um, but Vince McMahon has that kind of record of, we don't want to call you what you've been known as in other places because we want to trademark it. And if you leave, if we make you more famous, we don't want you to be able to then use
Yeah.
that somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that was probably my first exposure to the Road Warriors. So let's talk about how they got together. So the two men. So we've got Animal, which is Joe Laurinaitis, and then we have Mike Hegstrand, which was Hawk. And as we go into this documentary, we kind of understand that that Hawk has passed away, and a lot of people remember that happening. Um, remember him passing away because it was a big deal. That was in 2003.
Yeah.
So there was definitely mentions of it on WWE and whatnot at that time, and it was a big thing in the wrestling world. Um, and so
In
this is
fact, real, in fact, real quick, if I could, on the night that he, well, not the night, but like I guess on the Monday Night Raw that he technically passed away on, Bubba Ray Dudley came out with the Hawk uh, armband, and he was, they were doing and they didn't do the 3D that night. They did the Road Warriors finisher
I remember that. Yeah, now that you mentioned that, yeah, I do remember that.
because they were huge Road Warriors fans.
Yeah, I mean they anybody who aspire to be a tag team, in pro wrestling from this era or any other after that should definitely be you know studying the Road Warriors. Should
Yeah.
be fans of their work because I mean they were just incredible. They were really ahead of their time. Um,
Yes.
so these two men meet each other at a gym. Joe Laurinaitis is walking out, and as they say in the documentary, that Mike, aka Hawk, just comes up, slaps him on the chest in the middle of him doing some bench presses. It's like, hey man, you ought to be lifting more than I am, and that's how these guys meet. Um, and they eventually become bouncers together at what sounds like a incredibly dangerous bar in Minneapolis, which is
Yes.
Grandma B's. And one of the things I thought was incredible for this episode is like, it seems like this bar ended up being like the kind of like gathering place for a lot of these people who made it in the wrestling business. Um, some of our speakers that we have on the documentary, we have Barry Darso, who was the Repo Man, professional wrestler in WWF.
And wasn't it Axe in Demolition or
Yes.
was it Smash?
No, he was Smash. He was Demolition Smash.
Yeah.
Um,
Smash.
and then we have Scott Norton, who was in NWO and
Yeah.
WCW. Um, I mean, he was kind of like a NWO random, but was on national television. More famous than you or I. you know.
It's just
Uh,
very true. A lot more money too.
yeah, and then yeah, so we've got those guys. They mentioned Nikita Koloff being out of Minneapolis, but I don't know that he was hanging out at this bar or not. They never really mentioned that. So
No, I don't think he was. I don't think he was even like a part of that beforehand.
yeah, so it's crazy that a lot of these guys kind of came out of this same area in Minneapolis, and like this bar kind of ended up being this place where they would all meet. And of course, they come across none other than Ole Anderson in this bar. And at this point, when they met Ole, uh, Animal was not working anywhere yet, and he brought him in as just the Road Warrior. And man, that outfit! What did you think when you saw that original Road Warrior outfit?
Pretty much just like Animal stated, he was just like, "Yeah, I look like the Village People." Like,
Right.
I was just like, "Oh dear God! Thank God no one saw that in WWE, or they would go, "That's great. We're gonna dress them up like that."
Yes. Yes.
That's entertaining.
I could see Jim Cornette and Jim Ross in the back arguing with Vince, trying their best to convince him not to dress this dude up this way. Um, but at this point, Hawk was already working in Canada, and so the wrestling thing didn't really go that well for Animal. Well, they weren't Hawk and Animal yet, of course, but
Mhm.
the wrestling thing wasn't really going that well for them. So uh, he kind of goes back to being a bouncer. And then Ole comes in and finds out that he says, oh, you mean there's another one of these guys? Meaning, you've got another big guy that's like kind of the same, similar personality, similar look. And this is when they put him together as the Road Warriors and brought him back into Georgia Championship Wrestling. Um, and so Ole Anderson's got Georgia Championship Wrestling. He puts them together as the Road Warriors, and then uh, he ends up putting them together with Paul Ellering, which I think not to give Paul Ellering all the credit or anything, but I think Paul Ellering, based on everything that we know about this and what's in the documentary, I think Paul Ellering is really the guy that molded them into being what a team that could become a team of two superstars, and eventually become the best tag team in the world because he was their manager on screen and off screen, so he handled their bookings.
Yeah, he was a real life manager.
Yeah, he made sure they got from place to place. I mean, he was the guy that kind of molded and shaped them into a marketable product that was going to make bookings and make money.
Yes.
Because I don't know how much business sense either one of these guys had at the time. I mean, it, clearly Animal didn't, right? Because he talked about that he was making $150 a week or something like that, or in
Yeah.
6 weeks.
Yeah.
Just
Which was not uncommon back then, for
yeah.
wrestlers and stuff. So
Yeah, man, but if you're sending all your money back home, you got a wife and kid back home that you're taking care of,
yeah.
and you're out on the road, man. That's
Oh
that's
yeah.
tough. Yeah,
Oh yeah. It was definitely tough. And yeah, Paul Ellering was just that. Let's put it this way. There would be no Road Warriors if it wasn't for like you have to throw Paul Ellering. They can say the tag team, but really it's a triple, it's a six man. It's Paul Ellering is in the middle right there.
right. Yeah, yeah. It's definitely a trio. And my favorite Paul Ellering moment is when they brought Paul Ellering back on NXT
Mm-hmm.
with what did they call him on NXT?
Oh, AOP.
Yeah, Authors of Pain.
Yeah.
And the crowd chanted "Who are you?" at Paul Ellering, and Kevin Owens goes on Twitter and he's like, the fans at the NXT arena chanting "Who are you?" at Hall of Famer and legend Paul Ellering tells you everything you need to know about them. And I loved that. I absolutely loved that. Um,
I even knew who it was. I was like, "Holy shit, that's Paul Ellering!" Like, that's amazing.
yeah, the
You
man
know.
immediately brought legitimacy to the team. Um,
Yeah, and here was what I didn't understand was like in WWE, when they get to the main roster, the very first show, they're like, "No, we're just gonna shove him now to the side." I was like, "Wait, for real?" Like,
yeah, yeah,
I
that's what
just,
I thought too. And you see how it went after that.
yeah,
Woo.
I don't remember the last time I saw them on TV. Well, I saw them like a few months ago or something like that.
I'll edit that out. Just whatever.
Okay,
We're too far in now.
I have it on Disturbed.
Weird.
All right, let me make sure. Oh, okay, here we go. Okay.
You got it?
Thanks. So hang on. Well, where's the notifications? Okay. That should do it.
All right, cool. All right, we'll just pick back up, and I'll edit out that whole section.
All right.
All right, here we go. So I don't want to go through, all their different accomplishments because we'd be here all day, right? Not one at a time anyway. But I'll just list off, just some of the things that they did that kind of, were, it was monumental. They wrestled for literally all of the major promotions at that time. So
All of
yeah, they went through to the AWA.
them.
They went to Japan, which All Japan was, the shit at the time.
Yeah.
They were touring Japan with All Japan, and they were huge over there. I mean, anywhere they went, it was a sellout. Um, they won in '86. They won the inaugural Crockett Cup, which is an event that still takes place to this day. It's probably one of the more legendary tournaments in pro wrestling. Um, and then, of course, they get into the WWF in 1990, which, during this time, uh, if you wanted to be anything, then you ended up in the WWF at some point.
Yes.
Um, you know, this was probably a little before WCW was really destroying them in the ratings.
Oh,
Um,
very, very much.
so this is when WCW was awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've got a couple different guests that kind of talk about all these different things that they were doing at the time. Um, you know, what did you think about the Road Warriors when you started kind of learning more about them and kind of all their different accomplishments?
Well, first of all, I remember when they won the tag team belts in WWE when they defeated the Nasty Boys. And I just remember seeing that like on not the WWE network, but Classics on Demand. Remember that
Yeah,
from Comcast? It
yeah,
seems like so long ago at this point, doesn't it?
yeah.
But yeah, I saw it there, and the reaction that they got when they won, it was just amazing. Like people just went nuts when they won, so that was huge. But yeah, just the path that they have like drawn out over the years. I mean, people can say, well, they definitely weren't wrestlers. They were, and I think that was the success to them. They were not wrestlers. They even said it through this whole thing. They were like, we were never wrestlers. We didn't do arm drags. We didn't do headlocks and stuff like that. We just came in and beat people up. And a lot of fans, might shun away from that. But when you go out there and you are legit a badass, then just all bets are off the window, or out the window, rather, I should say.
They
And that's what these guys were. They
they
were
seem
just too,
stiff, man. They seem
yeah.
stiff as hell.
Oh, I'm sure they were, but they were just two walking badasses. I mean, if you think about it, they've always been heels, technically, but they just were so dominating that people just began to love them and stuff like that. And it's just it's insane. It's insane the legacy. I didn't realize that they literally wrestled though for everybody. I was just like, oh man, was there like a place that they didn't wrestle for? And it was like, nope. They wrestled for it. Like if you had a wrestling territory, you had the Road Warriors at some point.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean that finish, that legendary finish.
Oh God. The
Yeah,
Doomsday.
yeah. The Doomsday Device, just absolutely. I mean, man, you know, uh, it's still, for that time, you're talking about a point in time where the biggest star in the world was winning matches with a leg drop,
Yeah.
and they are hitting that.
Right?
Yeah, I
and,
mean,
and and I in that move, man, whenever I see that move and people take it, like when they clothesline them and then they just let the guy flip over, I always turn my head sometimes because I remember seeing. You remember? I think it was Phineas Godwin. In it was the Godwins versus the Road Warriors match, and they delivered the Doomsday Device, and he did not go all the way over, and he landed on his head. He's walking fine, you know. I mean, he's okay. It did, you know, severely injure him though, for a minute there. But every time I see it, I'm just like, oh my god, like you know, I if I was in the matchup with him, I'd be like, look, y'all can give that move to me, but you're going down with me. Like I'm not flipping.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, man, that I mean, the Godfather's in this episode for just a bit, and he's in there just to talk about how like he didn't want to take that move in the ring, and then we got to talk about this. This is like
yeah,
the hidden gem of the whole episode.
yes,
Vince McMahon in the titty bar taking all the finishes of everybody on the roster.
yeah.
If there was video footage of this, they could sell it for $100 on pay per view.
Probably even more. To
Vince
be
had
honest.
Vince had to have been out of his mind. I mean, he's always out of his mind, but like what was going through Vince McMahon's mind when he decided to do this? I mean, it just adds to like the complete enigma that is Vince McMahon that he would suggest something like this and then go through with it and then take the Doomsday device in a club like this.
And here's a fun fact too. When this episode aired, there was someone that I think or tweeted to Meltzer or something like that. They were like, Meltzer, this cannot be true. And even Meltzer goes, no, that's legit 100%. Like he actually heard about it. Like he was just like, no, he did that. Like, so if Meltzer, who calls, you know, his own bullshit and everything like that on anybody, you know, if he's even saying it, then I'm just like, oh my god.
Yeah, it
I
really
know
happened.
here's what I want to know though, right? Is we hear that you know he took the Doomsday device. What other finishers did he take as
Right,
well in that club?
right. I doubt any
Like
of them could have been worse. But yeah, I mean, there probably all kinds of stuff happened. And what was the staff thinking? You know,
I don't know. Maybe the bill was like so ridiculously high that they were just like,
I'm sure it
whatever.
was. Vince was probably paying for everything.
It must
Um,
have been. I really don't know.
you know, I talked about that WCW run that I remember them from, and it's interesting because like they were only in WCW for about 6 months during that '96 run, and in that run, just in 6 months, they started a feud with the Steiner brothers, huge.
Yes,
Had a feud with Harlem Heat, huge.
amazing.
Then they moved on to feud with the WCW Tag Team Champions Sting and Lex Luger at the time.
Yes, and that
Um,
story, great. I don't care what anyone says.
yeah, I remember all of that, and it's just like, man, these guys were a big deal.
Yeah.
They brought we talk about this a lot on this show. Is like the art of drawing is kind of gone these days. I mean, it's not gone, but it's it's no longer something that is that people strive towards. I mean, you definitely want to fill the house up, especially like on an indie show. But this idea of like what somebody can, what somebody can be worth money wise versus what they actually draw to a venue, that's not really a comparison anymore. And that's something
Mhm.
that was a big deal back then because that's what everybody was looking at. Now it's, in WWE, they're looking at merch sales and network buys and marketability and all this sort of other stuff. All these things that like the average wrestling fan doesn't care about and doesn't think about. But back then it was, can you put an ass in a seat? Okay,
Yes.
okay, how many? And that's what you're worth. That was your leverage when you were signing that contract. Um, but as we know, Eric Bischoff had a lot of issues with people. The rumor is that Bischoff promised them the second highest contract in the company in '96, which to me that says Hogan and then them, because we know Hogan was probably making a
Oh
national.
yeah,
Hogan was making more than anybody. So, um, yeah, I mean, obviously that didn't happen, so they end up returning to WWF. So while they're having all these different accomplishments, we of course have to talk about Hawk and kind of his, downfall. This guy got involved with the Japanese mafia. That was the thing to me that really stuck out. Like, oh
yeah.
man, this dude was crazy.
Well, how
And
they just kind of brushed over it.
right, yeah, they were just like, yeah, he was in Japanese mafia. They cut some people's fingers off and stuff. Oh, okay, you know, all right,
Another Tuesday night, like
yeah,
what?
yeah. And it sounds like Hawk was just off the rails all the time. They talked about him going on these 2 or 3 day partying binges and like mixing different drugs together and like sharing needles with other wrestlers. And I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
that's far fetched. I can definitely believe that.
I'm very happy to say that I've never witnessed anything like that in my time in the wrestling business, but it does not shock me that it happened, especially then because people are a little more aware now, of that kind of thing. But back then, it seems like certain folks just went completely off the rails, mixing drugs and, like I said, sharing needles and just it's like these guys had a hard enough schedule. They talked about being 14 days on the road and then 4 days off.
Yeah.
And that's just crazy, man, because you don't have time to do anything. Like, even if you go all the way back home, you've already been on the road for 14 straight days. I know me personally, I would just want to go sleep that shit off somewhere. There's no telling where you're gonna be at in the country when that 14 days ends. So you got to go back home. So that's probably half a day traveling, and then you're off for a couple days, and then you got to travel back to wherever you got to go next. Man, that's a crazy schedule. And to think that just with the training and the wrestling and the traveling, this guy then found time to go out and party. The only thing you can cut out at that point is your sleep.
Oh yeah, and they said that like he had been up for days at times.
Yeah, and I mean, running off of cocaine for several days at a time. I mean, your body just can't take that for
Yeah.
very long.
Yeah.
We've seen that over the years from, unfortunately, more wrestlers than we would like. Um, way more. I mean, it's just crazy to see that um, become a staple of professional wrestling during that time, that so many of them died from substance abuse and just the nature of the schedule, the nature of what they got into after hours. It's disappointing. Um, Probably, before we go into Hawk's death, because that's kind of the centerpiece of the episode. Um, let's talk about some of the different guests that we had on. I thought Nikita Koloff being on there was kind of cool. You don't hear much out of
Yeah.
him these days. I
Well,
you
there's because he's supposed to be Russian and he clearly isn't.
Right. Yeah. I think the cat's out of the bag on that one.
I know.
Um, Ed Sharkey was in there for a little while.
Mhm.
I was like, that guy's still alive? That's immediately what I thought when I saw Ed Sharkey on there. you know, it's like this guy is getting up there.
Yeah.
And we talked about Scott Norton. We talked about Paul Ellering, Godfather. Um, One of the things that I thought was interesting was his brothers, Hawk's brothers, and they were very adamant that he was Mike and not Hawk to them. Um, they talked about him being, a bully in school. He was like this kind of adamant, tough guy, legitimate tough guy. There's the quote in from Animal, I think, in the episode where he says, these guys were wrestlers trying to be badasses. We were badasses trying to be wrestlers. Um, you know, Hawk was like this really legitimate tough guy, and it's kind of weird because like his older brother seemed like he was considerably older, and his younger brother seems like he's maybe around our age. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, man. I mean, I just What'd you think about the speakers that they had on for this? Did anybody stand out to you in particular, or anything like that?
I don't really think anyone stood out in particular because and I think I've said this before on here, but like some of these are almost kind of like murder mystery episodes, kind of thing. And here, this one's not really a mystery. You know, pretty much I think everyone knows all the facts, so there's nothing anyone's really trying to hide or anything like that. But just some of the like really good speakers, again, Nikita Koloff in the thing, and talking about the Russian chain matches that they had, which were awesome. Like those were amazing back in the day. Um, them talk. In fact, I want to talk about SummerSlam 1992 when his drug problems really begin to surface, kind of thing. I did not realize that watching the event. I don't know, I guess like I just didn't pick up on that or something like that. But then like when I watched this episode, I went, "Holy crap! I didn't realize he was inebriated in that event." And that is one of the best SummerSlam pay-per-views of all time is SummerSlam 92. In front of a record crowd like that, which, if you show up, and I believe, even you as a booker, if you book someone to show up, right? And it's in front of this record crowd and they show up and they are not prepared like they are they dare come to work basically intoxicated like that. I would fire them on the spot. I'd be like, yeah, so that big huge push that I was going to give you, that's out because you're definitely not reliable. You embarrassed yourself and this company in front of a record setting crowd. You can't do that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right, man. You know, um, you look at like uh somebody coming to work drunk. The infamous Jeff Hardy and Sting match for
Oh,
TNA. Somebody coming to the arena completely intoxicated, they're unable to go out there. You don't let them go out there, and that's to protect you. That's to protect them. That's to protect their opponent. Back then in '92, things were a little bit different. Um, they still shouldn't have let him go out there, especially since Vince knew there was something going on. It was clear he shouldn't have gone out there. I mean, originally they were supposed to face the natural disasters for the tag belts.
yeah, and think of that matchup. I mean, I know people will say, "Oh, well, it's big man versus big man." I'm like, yeah, that would have been like the clash of the Titans, basically. That would have been, I mean, that would have made that pay per view one of the greatest pay per views of all time.
Right. Yeah. Um, and it's interesting that they had him go out there against Money Inc. At the time, and they still went over, even given how completely like intoxicated and unable to perform Hog was. I mean, the clips that they showed were just rough. Speaking of that, I I gotta note this out because I noted this down, and this may be my favorite part of the whole episode, other than Vince taking all the moves in the club. Um, but there's a spot where Paul Ellering is talking about them, and he says they were often imitated, never duplicated, and they show a clip of the Ascension.
I do remember that.
I was just like, shots fired. I mean, it's just like very brief. It's just like a second of them. And you're just like, yeah, they were trying. They failed, but they were trying.
Yeah, which
Uh,
is not the Ascension's fault. This is WWE's fault.
right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's 100% on them for trying to, saddle them up with that gimmick and have them, try to fill these very legendary shoes.
Well,
Um,
and for the longest time, people though said that Demolition was the exact copy of the Road Warriors. But then there's also that debate of sometimes people are like, Yeah, but some people consider Demolition better than the Road Warriors, just because they were better promos or something like that, and sometimes they had better matches.
Well, they
I
were
don't know.
more wrestlers than
And
than they were.
Demolition was awesome. I mean, the gimmick is really weird now looking back at it, because Demolition, obviously, that's dominatrix stuff is what they were going for with that. And of course, you don't get that like as a child when you're watching this. You just see like these two badasses basically. And now it's like, oh, that's what that meant. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was
Like,
weird.
but I mean, yeah, the feud though that they had in WWE though was awesome.
Yeah, agreed.
Demolition versus it's funny because it's one of those dream matches that WWE was actually able to cash in on. And
Yeah,
Barry Darso even says it. He's like, I thought we had amazing matches with the Road Warriors. I was just like, yeah, because y'all probably had amazing chemistry.
they did. Yeah, I mean that was, you talk about a sellout. Booked that match.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
you
and
know,
it did. It sold.
yeah, yeah. I mean, absolutely. And so we're talking about kind of Hawk's descent now. He's fallen off the wagon after SummerSlam '92.
Mhm.
He calls up and quits. I guess because he doesn't like the fact that they were bumped down the card and that they're not getting pushed as this top team anymore. But it
Mhm.
was his fault, you know. So he calls him up and he's like, "I quit. To hell with it." Um, so you've got they go back to Japan for a while. Then they have that WCW return that we were talking about. Eventually, they make their way back to WWF 97, 98. Um, at this point in time, this is when they started, doing kind of gimmicky type stuff with Animal and Hawk, and they
The
they added Draws
LOD,
back in.
yeah, the LOD 2000, and I actually remember this. One, I was actually just watching some of the Attitude Era recently, and yeah, it's the LOD 2000, and their manager was Sonny.
Yeah,
And which I remember my dad told me that when he picked me up from school, he was like, "You want to hear what happened on WrestleMania?" And I was like, "Yes, yes," because I couldn't watch it. And so that was one of them, and he was excited about it. He was just like, because he was a huge Sonny fan, obviously, and and so like he told me that, and then like you saw it, and it was like I look back on it, I'm just like, this just doesn't make any sense. Sonny and the Road Warriors, I'm not seeing it.
yeah.
It just didn't work.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of when they start doing this thing that WWF is known for, like where they just start. It seems like they're just trying to do whatever sticks. They're just throwing stuff at the board, you know. They brought in Sonny, that wasn't working, so they brought Draws in as the third member to make sure that Hawk didn't become a problem. Which it's just crazy to me that like everybody realizes, even the office realizes this dude has a serious substance abuse problem. And it's just so crazy that just 20 years ago that was like swept under the rug. And then they made an angle out of it.
God.
They br-
Yeah, and a lot of that angle stuff that they did with it, and they showed it. And I do remember this part, like on Monday Night Raw, where Hawk tries to commit suicide, and I know that has one freaking bro written all over it.
yeah, that has got to be Vince Russo.
That is Russo all the way, and Vince McMahon was just like, you know what? It'll probably actually be pretty good or something like that. I don't know, but I know Russo wrote that stuff, and I'm just like, oh my god, like, are you? I Yeah, and it was not a hit with anyone. That's why I understand when Jim Cornette gets pissed at that kind of stuff, because it's like, what did that do? Did it draw? any like did it put a number in the seat? Did it put a number in the ratings or anything? Did it do anything for anyone except make us look like idiots?
Right. And you can't erase it. I mean, once it's been on live television. It's on the network. Everybody knows about it. I mean, it's this like black mark on the absolute legacy that is the Legion of Doom and the Road Warriors. Um,
Yeah.
so obviously we've got all this kind of gimmicky stuff WWE is trying to do. This is when it's crazy that they're making an angle out of this while it's still going on. I mean, obviously Hawk's got more and more issues. They talked about him getting Hep C at this point in time, and he straightens up a little bit, and then he gets over the Hep C, and the doctor's like, "Yeah, man, you're good. Go do whatever you want." And I don't know if maybe he just doesn't know, whatever you want means to this guy, and so he just goes right back to partying. I even want to mention, we skipped over the scaffold match. They talked about him wrestling that match with a broken leg. I mean, the amount of like pain meds he had to have been on to be out there with a broken leg, wrestling the Midnight Express in a scaffold match to headline at Crockett Promotions. I
Yeah,
mean,
but they were taught that old school way, and they have that old school mindset of like, it doesn't matter if you're injured. You are booked, you show up and you do your job.
right? Yeah.
So,
I mean, you just
and
roll
that
with
was
it.
and it's a huge pay-per-view too. I mean, it's Starcade.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
So,
it was a big deal. Um, and he just did it, man. So wildly enough, they actually the Road Warriors actually made a appearance in 2003. They faced RVD and Kane, who were the tag champs at the time. Um, they were hoping to make a full time comeback, but like nothing ever came of it. I guess WWE wasn't into it.
probably.
Um, they competed in Japan a little bit more over that summer of 2003. Um,
Also made an appearance in TNA for a brief minute when they were in the asylum.
yeah, they what did they came in and it was like AMW that they
Yeah,
did something
yeah.
with.
America's Most Wanted was getting beat down by, I think, it was either the New Church or Sex at the time. I know it was that angle that they got involved in, but they came down and they saved them. And like, Chris Harris talked about it in interviews. He's like, there was no music, there was no pyro, there was no anything. They just ran down, and it was the loudest noise he had ever heard, like in his life being in the ring. I was just like, that probably had to be such an awesome moment for them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's around this time in 2003. Hawk kind of ends up like finding religion and realizing like, hey, I need to get my life together. Settles down, gets married. And these guys are hoping that they can come back to WWE, clean now. And then before that can happen, unfortunately, October 19th, 2003, Hawk passes away, and happens while he's moving. No doubt. I mean, it's like I hate moving. It's the worst thing in the world. So for Hawk to, you know, it, that's not a great way to go out. Um,
Yeah.
and so Paul Ellering does the eulogy at the funeral, which is wild. And he says he takes a quote here from Outlaw Josie Wales. It is good that men like us met in the struggle of life, which I thought was an interesting, kind of deep quote there. Um, what did you think about this whole situation? Because to me, it's like you've got these guys that everybody realizes this guy's got this really. I mean, you say substance abuse problem, but this guy, I mean, is taking it to a different level. I mean, do you think that they tried talking to him, or do you think he was just maybe he was that imposing of a guy that you just kind of let him do what he wanted?
Maybe a little of both, depending on who you were. I think if you were Animal, he tried to talk to him, obviously.
Right.
He told him, I was like, well, they broke up basically. He was like, I'm done unless you get your shit together. I'm done, kind of thing. Um, I'm sure Paul Ellering try. Here's the thing too. They made it known that it was like if he didn't have the guidance of Animal and Ellering, then that was why he went so far with it. Because he didn't used to go that far with it. Like Ellering would be the one to be like, all right, that's enough,
Right.
kind of. Animal would even do that, and Animal didn't really go out and party with him. Animal was that kind of guy, like, no, I'd like to get to bed and, you know, get up and train for the next day kind of thing. Um, Man, it just I'm sure that there are people that tried to talk to him. Maybe they didn't try hard enough, and maybe that's what some of them are wrestling with. Like they're wondering, should I have done more? Should I have done? But I'm glad though that it seemed like towards the end of his life that he was really in a good place, mentally, spiritually, just everything. He had found, his wife and stuff like, well, I guess soon to be. Well, I don't even think they were able to get married. Did they?
I'm not 100% sure. He says I think I want to say the animal says he got married, so maybe they did.
Because I had heard fiance too, so I didn't know if they'd actually got married. But yeah, so he got married. He found the love of his life and stuff like that. And unfortunately, it was just one of those things. That's just a freak accident type thing, like you just, he probably moved something really, really heavy, and his body was just like, hey man, I'm done. I can't go anymore, kind of
Yeah.
thing. It's such a sad way to go too, because you don't even realize it, kind of like that's basically what they made it seem like, hey, I'm just gonna go lay down for a while, and then just you don't wake up, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
um
Well,
Paul.
so I did look it up here. He did get married.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay. Because like I had heard something of like fiance before he died, kind of thing. So I was just like, wait, oh, did he get married? So, all right, cool. But Elring, being so deep with the eulogy and stuff like that, I'm not surprised. Because that's someone he knew like a brother, kind of thing. Animal even said it. He's just like, I lost literally my brother. Like we were, we were not from the same mother, but we were brothers, kind of thing. He probably saw Hawk more than he did his own wife.
Yeah. These guys were on the road together all the time,
So
constantly.
yeah. So, when something like that happens, it's just, it's heartbreaking. Um, and Hawk left us way too soon.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's just kind of that tragic tale, and it's very similar to Eddie Guerrero's death, where he had these years of substance abuse. He got everything straightened away, got himself together, got his life clean. Now, fortunately for Eddie, he had the best years of his career after that, whereas Hawks, heyday was kind of in the past. But they got their stuff together, and then just kind of out of nowhere, just passed away from all the years and years of damage they had done to their bodies. Um,
Yeah.
so it's yet another tragic tale from that era, and unfortunately, Dark Side of the Ring has a treasure trove of this type of thing to pull from because of all of the tragedy, all the substance abuse from that era.
Yeah, unfortunately, things were just the way that they were back then. And I think that that becomes a cliche to a lot of people. Where people are like, "Well, that still doesn't make it right." I'm like, and everyone is just like, "Well, we're not saying it's right. We're just saying it's the way that it was." You know,
Yeah.
like, what are you gonna do? Type of thing.
So kind of my kind of last thought on this episode is I this might be controversial with some people, but so Chris Jericho narrates most of season 2, and I think
Yeah.
he typically does a fantastic job. But I thought he phoned it in on this episode. It really felt like he was just like, in 1993, the Road Warriors would go on to become, like, it just felt like he was just like reading off an index card. I don't know. That stuck out to me. Did you pick up on that at all? It could just be me.
No, I just not really, because to me, I mean, to me, he's been, reading off a card the whole season. But
Mm,
I this isn't where he's putting his thoughts into it, kind of
right.
thing. This is like they are telling him, it's just like, hey, we actually do need you to say this, kind
Right.
of thing.
Yeah, I mean, of course, he's got a script.
I mean, even Mick Foley did that on the Bruiser Brody episode.
Yeah. I mean, they've all got a script. I think I just in this episode in particular, it felt dry to me, but I don't know. Maybe that's just it
Yeah,
could just be me. I might have
I
just
don't.
been looking for something to nitpick at. That's could have happened. But
Maybe.
that's all I had on this one, man. You got any final thoughts on this episode?
Just that, the Road Warriors, it's a tragic, tale for Hawk, but it still should not take away from the fact that the Road Warriors are I don't think there's any question they are the greatest tag team of all time. There has never been a tag team and never will be another tag team like them. The
Yeah,
ones that one that was just organic like that, you know? These guys were literally two badasses trying to be wrestlers, kind
yeah,
of thing. And and
absolutely.
and that's legit what it was. It sucks because you think of the last run that they possibly could have had with WWE. I mean, they could have gone up against the Dudley Boys. Think of the matchup that would have been, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Uh, and the Dudley Boys, Bubba Ray Dudley would probably just be like, all right, you know what? That's it. I can retire. I'm done after that. like,
Yeah.
but yeah, anybody that is a tag team needs to go and watch the Road Warriors, because that is what a tag team should be. And they're also the greatest to me because they were the only tag team that had such a longevity, and yeah, like they had the longest, run as a tag team, and they were able to be famous just from that. Everyone says that you have to do a singles in wrestling, and it's just like, no, you can be a tag team and do the exact same thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's been different periods in time in wrestling where there weren't a lot of tag teams, and a lot of the tag teams that did exist were just kind of thrown together. I mean, it's not that way on the indies today by any means, but I remember just 10 years ago, you could make it just because you were packaged as a tag team because no one was doing that. Everybody wanted to make it as a singles wrestler, and a lot of that comes with look at what they're doing in WWE. So like the tag division in WWE died out almost completely, and so people coming up and wanting to get into pro wrestling are like, I don't want to be a tag team. And so then you see a few years on the indies where everybody wants to be singles. And then that same thing, kind of happens. It's kind of the ebb and flow of it. What
And
is
Young Bucks have to be thanked for a lot of that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, a lot of what's going on with tag teams now, there's kind of a resurgence of tag team wrestling over the last couple of years. And so you're seeing that on the indie circuit too. You're seeing a lot of tag teams out there that are a package deal, and they don't work singles, or they rarely work singles and want to try to work as a team as much as they can.
And it's such a lost art form in and of itself. I mean,
Yeah.
you can have some of the best told stories with a tag match.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, well, we've got a lot of good stuff coming up. I mentioned that this was our eighth episode. We've done quite a few now. It's going to be By the time this one airs, because this one's not going to air until sometime in June, um, by the time this one airs, Dark Side of the Ring season 2 will be over. But we have a lot more episodes to cover. We have the finale for season 2, which is going to be the episode that when we heard about this show, everybody probably said they're going to do an episode on two things: Chris Benoit and Owen Hart, and that would have
Yeah,
been and so Chris Benoit opens season 2, and Owen Hart's going to finish season 2, and so I'm
yeah.
really excited about that.
I mean, I'm excited about it, but at the same time, I'm not. I'm just like, oh, that one's going to be difficult.
It
Yeah.
is definitely going to be tough to do, but a lot of these are tough to do. You look at
Oh
how
yeah.
many of these episodes involve somebody dying, and it's almost all of them.
The
Um,
brawl was the best one because I was just like, finally, no one dies in this thing.
yeah.
It's just
Well,
and
we still got David Schultz. We still got
yeah,
that one. Um,
New Jack.
and yeah, that one personally, a lot of times we give our guests, so we'll peel back the curtain here a little bit. Most of the time, our guests that come on, we usually give them the opportunity to pick, what they want to do out of the episodes we haven't done yet. And I'm
Mhm.
just surprised that no one has been like, I want to do New Jack, So that to me may have been the most entertaining episode because it's New Jack. I mean, it's just
Yeah, and I
it's New
didn't
Jack.
realize how entertaining of a dude New Jack actually was. I was like, I mean, the dude's a psychopath, but he's entertaining as hell.
Right. He's like the Joker, man. You can't stop watching him, but wouldn't want to really be in a room with him. You know? Um, so yeah, anyway, man, Caleb, thanks for joining us as always. Um, you know, uh you definitely got new episodes of Stovall Wrestling Network coming out. Go ahead and tell everybody where they can hear those.
Yeah, they can hear that wherever you can find your podcasts: Spotify, Google Play, iTunes, iHeartRadio. And of course, you can go on Facebook and visit SWN, the Stovall Wrestling Network. Find me on there. Go ahead, give us an ad, give us a like, and listen to the show. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you want to hear. Let me know what you want me to cover and stuff like that. We're looking to get more interactive and stuff like that. And it's pretty much every Tuesday. Sometimes it's Wednesday, depending on our schedules, but usually it's every Tuesday, a brand new episode. So, and we cover the past, the present, and possibly future of wrestling. So,
Well, definitely check that out. And
yeah,
you can check out Entertainment Involved on YouTube or Facebook to catch this podcast and Involved Review. You can check that out. YouTube and Facebook's the main places where we usually put this out. We debut every Sunday at 8 p.m. And we're usually online during the premiere to kind of one or both of us to kind of interact with people as they're watching it. So we really enjoy doing that. Um, so that being said, this has been an Evolved Review. Thanks for joining us, everyone.